Okay, let's unpack this. For years, the name Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, it's brought up so much, hasn't it?
Mm.
Mystery, power, this network that seemed untouchable.
Absolutely. And the questions just keep swirling.
Exactly. The alleged client list, the stories of blackmail, and maybe most of all, how he died. It's just fueled endless speculation, kept the story right there in the headlines.
Mm-hmm. Stubbornly so.
And now we've got what the Department of Justice and the FBI are calling, well, pretty definitive answers, right from the top.
That's the claim, yes.
So our mission in this deep dive is really to pull out the key nuggets from all the sources you've shared. We've
Yeah.
got NPR, Al Jazeera, Today News, the DOJ's own press release, The Independent, and some interesting analysis pieces.
Quite a stack.
Yeah. We want to help you understand these new official findings, put them in the context of the whole Epstein saga, and figure out, what does it all really mean for accountability?
That's the core question.
We'll focus on this new two-page memo from the DOJ and FBI, came out just today. It talks about their exhaustive review of the Epstein files.
And you'll hear their, well, surprising conclusions on a client list, any blackmail stuff, and of course, Epstein's death. But here's the ticker.
There's always a kicker with this story.
These findings seem to directly contradict what high-ranking officials have said publicly before. And that, well, you can imagine, it's just pouring fuel on the fire of public skepticism.
Understandably so.
So let's jump right in. What does this memo, released today, July 7th, 2025, actually say? It sounds like it came down with some very clear conclusions.
It did. The memo lays out three core findings, pretty starkly.
Okay, what are they?
First, they state unequivocally no evidence of an incriminating client list. None.
No list, okay.
Second, no credible evidence that Epstein was blackmailing his prominent associates.
Right, no blackmail.
And third, after what they call a thorough investigation, the FBI reaffirmed the previous finding. Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide, August 10th, 2019, at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York.
That's quite the statement. So this systematic review they mention, digging through digital files, physical searches. What does that really mean? Like, was this a fresh look or just checking the old boxes?
Well, they want you to believe it was a truly exhaustive, fresh look. They detail going through digital databases, hard drives, network drives, physically searching cabinets, desks, closets.
Okay.
The implication is they left no internal stone unturned. It's meant to convey thoroughness, maybe trying to put these specific questions to bed, finally.
Put them to bed. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, maybe confusing, because, like we said, these conclusions crash right into what we heard just a few months back.
Oh, absolutely. You have to think back to February 2025. Attorney General Pam Bondi was on Fox News,
I remember that.
and she stated very publicly that Epstein's client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now to review. She framed it as part of a commitment to transparency.
Right. Sitting on my desk. Very specific. And now, months later, this DOJ memo says flat out, no such list was found. This systematic review revealed no incriminating client list.
Exactly.
This isn't just a minor misstatement, is it? I mean, coming from the Attorney General, it doesn't just raise questions, it kind of tanks public trust, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What does that say about their internal communication or even their PR strategy?
It certainly highlights a massive challenge in managing public information, especially on a case this explosive.
Yeah.
Now, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, tried to clarify today, July 7th. She said Bondi was actually referring to the entirety of all the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes.
So not a specific list, just all the files.
That's the clarification. The administration's line is they were transparent by doing this big review and releasing the results. But like you said, the perception gap between it's on my desk and it doesn't exist,
Yeah.
it's huge.
It feels like a chasm, yeah. Makes the whole thing feel even murkier for a lot of people. Okay, speaking of things that won't go away, Epstein's death. What does this new memo add to that long-running debate?
It firmly doubles down on suicide. The memo stresses that this conclusion aligns with all the previous official findings.
Right, like the New York City medical examiner's autopsy back in August 2019.
Correct. And the U.S. Attorney's Office conclusion in November 2019, and then the DOJ's own Inspector General report from June 2023.
So multiple reviews, same conclusion.
Yeah, it's the official line, consistent findings across the board.
And the surveillance footage, that's always been a huge point of contention, the alleged glitches or missing time.
They address that directly. The memo says the FBI did an independent review of the footage,
Okay.
and it confirmed, quote, nobody entered any of the tiers, Basically, the cell block area from about 10:40 p.m. when Epstein was locked in on August 9th until 6:30 a.m. the next morning.
So trying to definitively rule out anyone going into his cell area?
That's the intention. Show a clear window where no external person could have entered.
It's also interesting. Some figures, even former FBI people like Kash Patel or someone like Dan Bongino, they used to publicly question the suicide narrative, right?
It did, very vocally.
But now, since joining the Trump administration, they've publicly stated they accept the suicide finding.
Yes, that shift in their public stance hasn't gone unnoticed. It adds another layer to the whole thing.
But despite all this, the consistent reports, the footage review, even shifts from former skeptics, you still have massive public skepticism, particularly, from groups often labeled the far right.
Oh, absolutely.
The idea that Epstein was murdered because he knew too much about powerful people, it just persists. You see influencers like Jack Posobiec saying things like, incredible how utterly mismanaged this Epstein mess has been. Or someone like Alex Jones, sarcastically predicting, next, the DOJ will say, actually, Jeffrey Epstein never even existed.
Yeah.
It feels like no amount of official confirmation penetrates that skepticism.
It really doesn't, for a significant portion of the public.
Why? What is it about this case? Is it just that missing minute of tape people talked about, or something deeper?
It's definitely deeper than just one piece of footage, though that didn't help. That skepticism feeds on, well, past actions and perceived inconsistencies, like the former Attorney General William Barr's review back in 2019. He came out very strongly, very confidently asserting it was suicide. But then, when the actual surveillance footage was released later, observers jumped on that missing minute of footage between 11:59 p.m. and midnight. Was it a glitch? Was it something else? For many, that detail became Exhibit A for potential tampering or a cover-up.
So it's the perception of incomplete transparency, maybe.
Exactly. That perception fuels the theories and keeps them alive, regardless of the official reports.
We even saw Elon Musk jump in briefly, remember? Those deleted posts back in June claiming Trump was in the Epstein files. He later said he regretted it, went too far.
Right, shows how volatile and wide-reaching the speculation gets.
Yeah. Okay, so let's maybe clarify this whole Epstein list idea. The DOJ says no incriminating client list was found, but people talk about the list all the time. What are they usually referring to?
That's a really crucial distinction. When people talk informally about an Epstein list, it usually means one of three things, none of which is necessarily the single client list the DOJ memo addresses.
Okay, what are those three?
First, you have the flight logs. These are the records from Epstein's private jet, the infamous Lolita Express.
Right, lots of famous names on those.
Celebrities, politicians, royals, academics, yes. And this is vital. Just being on a flight log doesn't mean someone was involved in or even knew about Epstein's crimes. Many have denied any wrongdoing.
Okay, so flight logs. What's second?
Second is the Black Book. This was Epstein's personal address book. Apparently had over 2,000 names, big names, heads of state, media figures, actors, scientists with contact info, notes. It somehow became public.
His personal contacts, essentially.
Essentially. Again, being in his address book doesn't automatically imply guilt. And third, the court documents.
From the lawsuits.
Exactly. Specifically, the records unsealed from the civil case Virginia Giuffre brought against Ghislaine Maxwell. These documents named lots of people, alleged participants, yes, but also potential witnesses, people mentioned in passing, associates.
So a much broader group named in legal filings, not necessarily all accused of crimes.
Precisely. So the list people talk about is often a mix of these three things, not the single mythical client list the DOJ says doesn't exist in their files.
Got it. That's helpful. And then there's the island, Epstein Island, Little St. James. It's almost like a character in the story itself.
It really is, that private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
With that weird blue-striped temple-like building.
Yeah, the temple, which fueled so many theories. Plus the docks, the helipad, talk of tunnels. Its isolation and features became symbols of secrecy and alleged wrongdoing.
What did the place suggest to people? Why was it so central?
Well, according to victims and prosecutors, it wasn't just his home, the primary location for the abuse, for trafficking. The idea was that powerful guests could be brought there, compromised perhaps.
Right.
The sheer isolation, the luxury, the weird architecture, it all painted a picture of a place designed for illicit activities, far from prying eyes. It became the physical embodiment of his dark network.
So tying these threads together, the names, the island, the secrecy, Why does this case grip people so intensely? What are the underlying drivers?
I think there are a few key reasons. One is clearly power and accountability.
Hmm.
Epstein mingled with the absolute elite, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, Bill Gates, many others,
Names everyone knows.
right? And the fact that he avoided serious consequences for so long, it wasn't just seen as a legal failure. It looked like proof that extreme wealth and connections could buy impunity, like an institutional shield. It shook faith in the system.
Makes sense. What else?
Then you have the intelligence and espionage theories. Whispers and suggestions from some experts, even whistleblowers, that maybe Epstein was running a blackmail operation, possibly linked to intelligence agencies like Mossad or the CIA.
Is there any proof of that?
Our sources are clear. No conclusive proof. But the circumstantial details, his mysterious wealth, the nature of his connections, it keeps those theories bubbling, adding a whole spy thriller layer to it.
Right. Compromat idea.
Exactly. And finally, there's the role of the media and justice. There's a strong perception, backed by some evidence, that mainstream media outlets were slow, maybe even reluctant to cover Epstein's crimes initially.
Why? Because of the powerful people involved.
That's the allegation. You had ABC's Amy Robach caught on that hot mic in 2019, right? Saying the network shelved her interview with the survivor years earlier, potentially because of pressure related to the Clintons or even the British royal family.
Yeah, I remember that blew up.
It fed into this narrative that powerful forces could influence media coverage, potentially delaying justice.
And tragically, we have to mention the human cost. The recent death of Virginia Giuffre.
Yes, just this past April, April 24th, 2025. She died by suicide in Western Australia. She was such a prominent voice, a key survivor who bravely spoke out against Epstein and Prince Andrew.
A devastating reminder of the toll this took on victims.
Absolutely. Her fight was central to exposing so much of this.
And the DOJ memo itself acknowledges the scale, right? It mentions more than 1,000 victims of Epstein's abuse. Their sensitive information is in these files.
It does. Over 1,000 victims. It's staggering.
So, given that, what's the DOJ's logic for not releasing more information now? They say they have info on over 1,000 victims, but then say no more disclosure. How do they square that? Especially when, as we discussed, withholding info can sometimes fuel more suspicion.
It's a really tricky tightrope they're trying to walk. Their stated reason is very specific. They argue that releasing more, especially if it just feeds unfounded theories, ultimately doesn't help combat child exploitation or bring justice to victims.
So protecting victims and stopping misinformation is the stated goal.
That's the official rationale. They determined no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted based on that logic. But you hit the nail on the head for those already skeptical.
Yeah.
Any withholding, even if the stated intention is victim protection, can easily be interpreted as more evidence of a cover-up. That's a catch-22. Trying to quell speculation might inadvertently intensify it for some.
It's a fundamental trust issue, it seems.
Deeply.
Just to quickly recap the timeline for everyone listening, this whole thing goes way back. First police report, Palm Beach, 2005. Then that infamous 2008 plea deal, the sweetheart deal.
Right.
Virginia Giuffre accuses Prince Andrew in 2015. Epstein's arrested again in 2019, then dies in custody. Ghislaine Maxwell convicted in 2021.
Yep.
And then waves of court documents unsealed in 2023, 2024, revealing more names. It's been a long, drawn-out saga.
Decades, really.
So, wrapping this all up, what's the big picture here? We have these definitive-sounding statements now from the DOJ and FBI. No client list, no blackmail, suicide confirmed. Done.
That's the official conclusion.
But then we have these really awkward, jarring shifts in the narrative, like the Bondi list on my desk comment versus today's memo. And that just seems to widen the gap between the official story and what a lot of the public believes, or at least suspects.
It really does. And what's striking when you dive deep like this is realizing this isn't just a crime story. It's become this massive case study, hasn't it? About how power, intense secrecy, and maybe corruption just collide.
Yeah.
It exposes these, well, deep cracks in our legal systems, maybe even in global governance structures, and definitely raises questions about media accountability when powerful people are involved.
Well, fundamental questions seem to remain, regardless of memos.
Exactly. Who knew what? Why did it take so long for any real action? Those questions seem to persist and drive public interest almost independent of the official findings now.
So here's something to think about. We've got this stated commitment to transparency from the government, culminating in this memo saying no list, no blackmail, yet public mistrust seems as high as ever. What does this whole deep dive into the Epstein files really tell us about the challenge of achieving genuine public accountability when powerful figures and deep-seated suspicion are involved? What's the one thing from all this that you'll be mulling over?